Welcome, everybody, to the Scale Up Show. This is your host, Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me today. I have Jeremey Donovan. Jeremey is the EVP of RevOps and Strategy at Insight Partners, which practically has over 80 billion in assets managed. It's a combination of venture capital and private equity. And Jeremey's got a lot of background in sales, tech, and marketing, some really cool things that he's done. He's an adjunct professor at University of Chicago right now, formerly led sales at SalesLoft, CB Insights, GLG, and was the CMO at the American Market Association. That wasn't enough. He also had a chance to write 5 books along the way, including How to Deliver a Tech Talk and Predictable Prospecting. Jeremey, welcome. Happy to have you on the show, man.
Hey, thanks. Excited to geek out with you on, a lot of different things, I guess, a lot of AI too.
Yeah, it was super cool. So just so you have some context, I've never met Jeremey before until we were at an event recently, a go-to-market event. And we just started chatting. I think it was during a cocktail hour about
We're just lurking. You and I think Hayes Davis and I just geeking out. I think 3 tallish people. I think. Well, I know Hayes is tall. I'm trying to remember if you're a pretty tall person.
I'm
too.
not that tall. I felt like the little brother in the conversation, right? I was standing next to 2 twin towers over here. I mean, I'm almost 6 foot, so it's not like I'm super small, but I mean, you're 6'4", 6'5", something like that?
Yes.
Jesus, man. Well, anyways, so it was good, but it was an amazing conversation. And then as I told Jeremey, I was debriefing when I got back. I'm like, I got to have him on the show. He'd be awesome to talk about. So I gave a real quick backdrop on you. Anything else you want to add in terms of what you're focused on now? Because I know you have a unique role over at Insight, or what you're super passionate about as well right now. And then we can get into how AI is transforming go-to-market.
I guess personal passions is a separate thing, which is fly fishing and cats. But besides the personal passion thing, on the professional side, Insight, as you described, pretty big VC firm, and we have 2 sides. We have an investment side and an advisory side. I had never in my career wanted to be an investor. When I left school, a lot of my colleagues, both from undergrad and grad school, went into investment banking and finance and whatnot. That was never for me. So I found my way out here on the advisory side. So my day job is basically working with portfolio companies from diligence to ongoing operations, and then ultimately helping them with exit prep. So I'm a kid in the candy store because I love to learn. That's when I take those tests like StrengthsFinder, I always score off the charts on learning as my number one driver. So I get to see everything, right? Like every size company, every go-to-market motion, we do all B2B SaaS, but within B2B SaaS, right? Like every vertical. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's cool, man. I'm very high on the learning spectrum as well when it comes to the strength finders. I don't think it's my number one, but it's definitely up there. So anyways, I could relate on that as well. So by the way, the one thing I wanted to ask you too is what size of companies do you work with on the advisory side, from what revenue to low to high?
We're all sizes. We do segment our team. So I tend to work 10 to 100 million ARR. Okay. And then we have teams that are sub 10 and teams that are above 100. And I will say, that when I sometimes interact with a 1 to 10 company, I understand why I have counterparts in that space. It's just very, very different. And then, ditto with over 100. The last startup I worked for, when it got over 100, it's a little less interesting to me because I do like getting super hands-on with stuff. I still code. I've coded since I was a teenager. I consider myself nowhere to go kind of in and out of AI, but I'm both I am almost certainly our number one user of AI. And in fact, I know because I see the OpenAI bill, and it breaks it down by user, and I'm the number one user. So I'm both a huge user, but then I'm also probably one of our biggest skeptics, if not our biggest skeptic, about the application of AI in go-to-market strategy and operations. So yeah, those are some of the passions.
That's polarizing, man. I love that. And we're going to do episode 2 specifically about use cases and why he's the number one user, right? So I don't even know everything that he's using it for. We talked about some high level things, but I'm going to learn a few things in episode 2. But for right now, so what do you see? What's your strategy for leveraging AI led growth for go-to-market? How do you kind of approach it when you're advising companies, and how do you approach it systematically as well?
Yeah. I'll separate the companies who are sort of in the business of AI from our portfolio companies who are often using AI, but and they may be, some of them are AI native companies, but I'm really focused on how can we increase productivity and efficiency of these companies in any means, of which AI is an option. And this is where like I'm both an optimist and a skeptic. So if I think about go to market, right, and I'm going to set aside marketing for a second. I think you've had some great guests who've talked on the marketing side. So on the sales side, whenever I think about companies, I think about jobs to be done, right? And those jobs to be done progress from identifying, what's your ICP, which is an AI exercise, probably more on the machine learning side than on the LLM side, figuring out who the right prospects to engage, whether they're existing customers or new prospects, engaging those people in one way, shape, or form, working opportunities, closing deals, supporting those people, and so on. So with each one of those jobs to be done, I mean, there are some things that we would strongly encourage our portfolio companies to do. Where our posture, if you will, is reactive, right? We don't tell our companies what to do when they come to us asking for help. We advise them and make recommendations, and then it's their choice on what to do. But if I'll give one example, right? Let's take the SDR world. There's a lot of chatter in social media and elsewhere on like the future of SDRing. I'll make it into a verb. There, at least the current point of view is we are, well, I will say okay. So I'm pretty negative on SDRing for outbound cold prospecting. You see it, I see it, your listeners see it. When you get an email that looks like, hey, I noticed that you blah, 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 right? Like immediately your spidey sense is tingling that this is faux personalization. And I think that's the issue, right? Is like, look, if you're the first person who ever got an email like that, you would not necessarily know that a machine did it because it like looks otherwise great. But when you've received 100 or 500 or 1,000 of those emails that all look like that, the pattern is a machine pattern. And you're like, okay, this person didn't care enough to engage me. They don't really know me. It's BS. So, we've had some of our portfolio companies test some of these AI native solutions, pure AI, SDR, and had not had good results. So like, it's not just gut, it's actually experience with our portfolio companies where they sent thousands and thousands of emails and got no ROI off of that. So in contrast, right, like I think you have to separate the inbound and the outbound function. So on the inbound side, super valuable, right? When someone has inbound interest, and I don't mean content downloads, I mean, they want a demo request, they want to talk to sales, right? Like they're high priority intent, then you don't need a human in the loop. In fact, the human in the loop is going to be slow and is going to make mistakes. So there you can just have the AI like book the meeting, answer questions, reschedule meetings, pursue people who ghost you. Like there's no like major reason to have a human in the loop in like facilitating an inbound. Again, like this stuff might change and you might ask like, okay, well, some of these AIs now have voice capability. I also feel like having an AI call me for sales prospecting is circa, end of 2024, early 2025. Buyers are not ready for that. Who knows? Maybe that'll change. I'm never going to say never. I'm old enough to not be so naive that the world's not going to change, but I would also be super skeptical even when is more voice capable. I think it already is voice capable, but more voice capable for outbound prospecting.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, so it's funny I don't know, we haven't really talked about this, but like I help companies like standardize on an LLM and then integrate AI into their go-to-market, right? And so one of the things that I'll do is I'll evaluate tools that could create an asymmetrical advantage. And one of them was one of those AI SDR tools. And it was more for partnering that I was looking at them. So I'm like, all right, if this is really good, I could definitely like infuse this and help people out, right? Help my clients out and facilitate introductions. But the interesting thing that happened was then because I saw a demo, I was put into like an automated sequence of follow-up to try and get me to convert. And a lot of the things that were being done didn't make any sense and like weren't in alignment even with the conversation that we had, right? And so
yeah.
I think there's a danger of that too. And now granted, this was six months ago, so things could have changed, right? But
it'll improve, like I think the question, it's not, I think of like self-driving cars, right? The point is not that with a self-driving car, it never has an accident. The point is it statistically far less likely to have an accident than a human? And I think it's the same thing as like, yes, AIs are going to goof up from time to time, but statistically, they're going to goof up less and less and less to the point where they goof up less than humans. Like I got a prospecting email yesterday where, it just had bracket capital FNAME, right? That they goofed on that. They probably sent that email to, who knows, 100 or 1,000 plus people. So humans goof too. It's like, will this goof less? So I think it will goof less. I think to me, like that's an application where having an AI is not necessarily a bad one, which is, I'm going to call that nurturing, right? As you watched a demo, you attended a webinar, you downloaded content. Those things to me don't rate as leads for sales pursuit in most circumstances, in 99% of circumstances. So the right thing there is to nurture for a period of time. And I think, for me, the ultimate goal of nurturing is to get people to like use the call to action to request a demo and talk to sales, digitally nurture until they're ready to actually talk to a human. So that's a good use.
I think that makes sense. What about for full cycle then? Like, and I don't know if you've seen this from Gartner, but like the migration from, basically AI assisted selling to autonomous selling for full cycle. What's your thoughts and perspective on that?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen I used to work for Gartner for 16 years, by the way. But I have not seen that particular research. I guess I have to make an assumption around what like fully autonomous is. But when you talk full cycle to me, I'm thinking about the application of AI in particular once I have an opportunity, what do I do then? And how can I use AI to augment my success from qualified opportunity to close? And that's a place where really there have not been great tools. It's a place where the humans really dominated. And I do think, there are more and more applications there. So for instance, you'll notice, by the way, I tend to not mention companies. So I'm just kind of sort of say like, there are companies out there who are recording calls, right? And then based on those call recordings are filling out information within your CRM and or just capturing that in other ways so that they can come back and say like, here's this checklist of things that a good, healthy opportunity has, right? This good, healthy opportunity has a next step. This good, healthy opportunity is multi-threaded. This healthy opportunity has a clear economic buyer identified, has a champion or multiple champions, right? It's multi-threaded. It's this, it's that, right? So those things really hard for a sales manager to glean, and the sales manager doesn't have time to listen to every sales call recording. So that's a great instance of where AI can capture that stuff and then flag gaps on deals or flag a manager during a deal review to say like, hey, I was doing a deal review with one of our portcos of the day, and they had a big Q1 deal, and we're close enough to the time where that would need to be in a later stage, and it wasn't, right? So it didn't have to be me seeing that deal and asking those questions. The system could have prompted the head of sales in that company to say, hey, the things don't look right here, right? There's not enough activity on this deal based on the conversations that are being had between the prospect and the salesperson. Like, this is not whatever in the advanced stages. The close date needs to be pushed back or whatever. So like, I think that to me, from like a full cycle selling point of view, I think is a real fruitful area of productivity for AEs and teams and sales managers for that matter, who have also been relatively underserved by technology.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, that's where I see what's happening. Like in my kind of worldview is there's a lot of steps in the sales process, like not even the SDR, but just say that once it's an opportunity that are predictable. And so I think there's going to be a big shift with agents from the reactive to the proactive, right? So
yeah, one of the more well, it's not even sci-fi, like interesting things is, right, as we talk so much about inside selling where these calls are being recorded on Zooms, but a lot of selling happens in person. So, maybe it's a when, not if. Will we be at the point where, your glasses or the little pin on your lapel, right, is recording the conversation and feeding that also in? I mean, it raises some interesting privacy and trust issues, but these things become, for better or worse, like more and more the norm. So maybe you like ask for consent to record even when you're in a face-to-face situation, for quote unquote quality control purposes. But I mean, these things can creep in and become more the norm. So I'm also going to say never on, on like the for those who read sci-fi, Neil Stephenson is one of my favorite authors. So like the Neil Stephenson-esque vision of where the world could be heading on this.
Yeah. Well, did you see the one? So I think it was like some Stanford or MIT students that hacked that together, and they did it with the meta glasses. And basically, now I agree, consent is huge, but they did it without, they were just testing it, walking around, and it would like pull up their Instagram profile, all the details behind them. And then as they were walking through, which is like pretty sci-fi.
I did see that. I did. And pretty, amazing, creepy, but but again, I think it will become, that one especially, I think becomes the norm, because like as you're walking around to do that kind of identification, but then how you use it is also interesting. I mean, these questions also exist independent of the AI world, right? Is there's visitor identification on websites, right? So, let's say you visit my website, and then I call you, like, is that call, we're about to get visited by a furry friend here, is that call something that I mentioned that you were on the website, or is it just sort of coincidental timing?
Yeah.
Right. So it's the same kind of thing as if you're, walking around and engage somebody in conversation. Like, I don't think you bring that stuff up, but who knows? Maybe it becomes normalized.
Like people think their phones are listening to them anyways, because ads start showing up in their feed if they talk about something, if they say a keyword, right? So
my wife and I had that conversation last night of actually, because there was stuff in my feed that was stuff we had been talking about, but not something I, consciously thought I had searched for. But I think in truth, I probably had searched for it, or someone had emailed me.
Okay.
Something fly fishing related.
Well, all right. So we got one last question that we got to wrap up. But let me ask you this. So like can you walk us through a recent like AI driven success story that someone in the portfolio you've worked with has had, and specifically as it relates to go to market? Because we'd love to just hear kind of what you're seeing at scale since you look across so many different companies.
I think that, well, I mean, I don't know if you consider support go to market, but that one is obviously super low hanging fruit. Like, to me, separately, the two lowest hanging fruits for efficiency and productivity inside of companies right now, number one is engineering, right? Of how you can accelerate coding. And then number two is customer support. But outside of that, the main use cases I would cite is the inbound side, is companies are getting a lot of productivity gains off of retooling the way that they handle and route inbound leads using AI instead of using humans to triage, whether that's, taking your inbound SDRs and redirecting them to other work, or just making your existing account executives more productive because they don't have to pursue those people. So that to me is like super low hanging fruit. And there are definitely companies that we recommend to our portfolio that are saying like, hey, use these consider, we can't tell them what to do, but we consider using these vendors for this inbound use case, because you're going to get a lot more efficiency and productivity out of it.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's very sharp, very specific, measurable. So we are up on time though. Where can people find you? Where can they find out more about you? And then we'll wrap.
Yeah. So best way to get in touch with me is LinkedIn. I'm sure that's what everybody says.
And he put some good content out there. He's got very measurable, tactical things that you could use, or things that he's seen. So I just checked out some of his posts recently. He's got some good stuff there. So Jeremey Donovan on LinkedIn, don't miss him. And you got to put at Insight Partners, because there's a lot of Jeremey Donovans out there. So
yeah.
Anyways, thanks for being on the show, Jeremey. This is a lot of fun, man.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. And we will see you all on the next episode.